Beneath a bruised, fading sunset in Hawthorne, Nebraska, a town that time seemed to have forgotten, there stood a relic of better days, the Dusty Rose Diner. Once the vibrant heart of this small farming community, the diner now exuded a quiet melancholy. Its chipped, yellowed sign hung crookedly above a doorway framed by peeling paint, and the cracked windows told stories of laughter and loss. Beyond its faded neon glow, endless fields of withered corn and abandoned homesteads stretched into the distance, echoing a past of hard work and simpler joys. Inside the diner, the dim lighting struggled to dispel the shadows that clung to every corner. The pungent aroma of burnt coffee mixed with the lingering smell of grease and dust, a scent that had become as familiar to the dwindling regulars as the sound of the ancient clock that ticked relentlessly in the background. Each creak of the floorboards, every whispered sigh of the wind outside, served as a reminder that this place was a living monument to memories of a time when hope and prosperity once reigned. At the counter behind a glass display case dusted with neglect, Edna Harper worked quietly. At 78 years old, her small frame moved slowly, as if burdened by decades of heartache. Her silver hair, once meticulously styled, was now loosely tied back, and the deep lines etched on her face bore silent witness to a lifetime of loss and perseverance. Once the proud owner of the Dusty Rose Diner, Edna had poured her heart into the establishment alongside her beloved husband Tom. But when Tom succumbed to a lingering lung disease 6 years ago, and with mounting medical bills and the departure of her children, the diner was sold to a new owner. Since then, Edna had been left as nothing more than a hired hand, clinging to memories of a dream that had long since turned sour. As dusk settled, the diner's bell, its chime soft and mournful, rang out each time a weary soul crossed its threshold. On that particular evening, with the sky shifting from deep purple to a gentle indigo, a solitary figure approached the diner. In a sleek black sedan parked quietly on the gravel lot, a man whose presence seemed at odds with the quiet desolation of Hawthorne pulled up and stepped out. It was Donald Trump. No Secret Service agents flanked him, no entourage followed in his wake. Only the quiet determination in his step and the glint of purpose in his eyes marked his arrival. The town's residents, few as they were, looked on with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. They had seen him before, on television screens in their living rooms and on faded newspaper clippings. But never like this, alone, unheralded, stepping into the fading light of a forgotten diner. The door to the Dusty Rose Diner burst open with a resounding jingle. Inside, patrons, an old farmer in a threadbare jacket, a young mother quietly cradling her sleeping child, and a few others huddled at scattered tables, turned as one. Their eyes widened in silent shock at the sight of Donald Trump striding into their sanctuary, his dark suit, sharply tailored and immaculate despite the rustic surroundings, contrasted starkly with the worn-out decor and faded wallpaper. He scanned the room with a steady, purposeful gaze before choosing a scarred wooden table near the counter. The atmosphere thickened with hushed murmurs and the weight of expectation. Behind the counter, Edna Harper looked up from her work. Her frail hands, calloused by years of labor, gripped a dented silver tray. In that brief moment, the years of hardship, loss, and quiet resignation seemed to stand still in her eyes. For her, the diner was not merely a workplace. It was the only remnant of the life she had once known. Of the promise she had shared with Tom, the diner was her home, a place where the echoes of the past mingled with the smell of coffee and the scratch of a worn-out cash register. Trump's deep, steady voice cut through the silence. "A cup of coffee, black, no sugar," he commanded, his tone crisp and unexpected. Edna's eyes flickered with surprise before she nodded and hurried to fulfill the order. With measured steps, she placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of him. The rich aroma rose in delicate curls, and for a brief moment, the diner seemed to hold its breath. As Edna's hands trembled slightly while setting down the cup, Trump's eyes softened ever so subtly. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, his tone surprisingly gentle as he leaned forward. Edna paused. Her voice, barely above a whisper, was laced with the bitterness of unspoken years. "So long I stopped counting. This place has been my whole life," she confessed, the weight of her words echoing off the worn wooden walls. Trump's gaze was intense, his eyes searching the lines of her face as if to unlock the story behind them. "Then why not rest at your age? You ought to have some peace," he suggested, a note of genuine concern threading through his voice. Edna's laugh was hollow, edged with sorrow and a sense of futility. "Rest? If I stop, who's going to pay my debts? Who's going to keep this old joint from falling apart?" she murmured, her voice cracking under the weight of a lifetime's burden. Her words fell like stones, breaking the surface of a carefully constructed resignation that had kept her going day after day. For a long moment, silence reigned. Trump's fingers tapped slowly on the table, as if the rhythm might coax out the hidden truths of this place. His eyes moved from Edna to the faces of the other patrons, noting the expressions of weary resignation mingled with a spark of hope. A hope that was as fragile as it was persistent. In that charged silence, an idea took root in his mind. An idea that would not only change Edna's fate, but also breathe new life into the dying town of Hawthorne. "Edna," Trump said, his voice lowering into a soft yet resonant tone, "you've given your whole life to this place. What keeps you going when it feels like everything's gone?" His question was not an accusation, but an invitation, a challenge to reveal the heart behind the sorrow. Edna's eyes drifted to a peeling wall behind the counter. There, faded and curling at the edges, hung a photograph of a younger Edna and her husband, Tom, on the day the diner first opened its doors. Their smiles were radiant, filled with hope and promise. "When Tom passed," she began, her voice rough and choked with emotion, "I didn't know what else to do but keep on. He said this diner was our dream. Now it feels like it's all just a burden, something I'm forced to hold on to." Her words trembled, each syllable heavy with grief and longing. Trump listened, his expression unreadable at first, then softening further as he considered her pain. "So why not sell it? Walk away like the rest?" he asked, the challenge in his tone mingling with genuine curiosity. For a moment, the air thickened with tension. Then, as if a dam had burst, Edna's response came out in a flurry of anguish and anger. "Sell it?" she snapped, her voice rising. "I lost it long ago. When Tom got sick, I borrowed every dime I could to save him. But he slipped away anyway, and now I'm left with debts I can never pay. The new owner took the diner. I'm just a hired hand in the place I built with my own 2 hands. Her voice cracked like brittle glass, the pain raw and unedited. The entire diner seemed to lean in, every patron catching their breath as the truth unfolded. Even the old farmer in the corner, whose rugged features often masked a lifetime of hardship, had tears glistening in his eyes. He muttered softly to the man beside him, "She's never told a soul this before." The quiet acknowledgement of shared suffering rippled through the room, binding everyone together in that moment of collective empathy. Trump's eyes narrowed thoughtfully as he considered her words. In the silence that followed, his tapping fingers stilled, and a determined glint emerged in his gaze. "You say this town's dying, but I see you still standing, still fighting," he said slowly. "What do you really want, Edna? If you had one shot to change everything." His voice trailed off, inviting her to complete the thought. Edna looked up, momentarily taken aback by the challenge in his tone. For a long, breathless moment, her eyes shone with confusion, then softened, as if a long dormant ember had been fanned to life. "I want this diner back," she whispered, barely audible. "Not for the money, but because it's home. Because I need to prove that not everything's lost." Her declaration was quiet but resolute, a spark that might yet kindle a transformation. The tension reached its peak when Edna, overcome by emotion, stepped away from the counter. She reached into a battered wooden drawer and slowly extracted a small, dusty box. With trembling hands, she opened it to reveal a tarnished silver ring, the wedding band Tom had worn on their wedding day. As she held it close, tears streamed down her face. "I nearly sold this ring last week to pay the bills," she cried softly. "If I lose this diner too, I'll lose the only piece of him that I have left." In that moment, the diner fell silent, as if the very walls were absorbing her grief. Every heart present felt the sting of her loss, and even the old clock seemed to tick slower in reverence for her sorrow. Trump stared at the ring, then back at Edna. A steely resolve flashed in his eyes, a promise that he would not let this woman's life be defined by despair. Leaning forward, he said in a voice that was both firm and tender, "You won't lose it, Edna. Not ever again." His words hung in the air, delicate yet unyielding, a lifeline offered when hope had all but vanished. Without another word, Trump rose from the table. The tension in the diner, palpable just moments before, shifted to a charged silence as he made his way to the door. Outside, beneath the deepening hues of the Nebraska twilight, he pulled his phone from his vest pocket. With a few measured words into the receiver, his tone was low and determined. "Dig into Edna Harper and the Dusty Rose Diner now. I want everything. Her debts, the owner's records, every detail. Move fast." The wind whipped dust across the barren parking lot as Trump's words set a series of events into motion, a chain reaction that would soon spark a revival in a town on the brink of oblivion. Over the next few days, while the town of Hawthorne slumbered beneath vast, star-studded skies, the gears of transformation turned in secret. Trump's instructions had reached local contacts and trusted advisors, and soon an investigation was underway. Detailed reports began to emerge. Edna's debt had grown to an unpayable sum of $50,000, and the new owner of the diner? A man named Carl Jensen had been struggling to keep the failing business afloat. Carl was a desperate entrepreneur, bleeding money with each passing day, and his frustration with the diner's dwindling fortunes was palpable. In the meantime, Edna continued her daily routine with a resigned determination. Each morning she arrived at the Dusty Rose Diner before dawn. She would unlock the creaking doors, wipe down the counters, and prepare for another day of serving lukewarm coffee to the few remaining souls clinging to the vestiges of a lost era. Her life had become a slow ritual of loss and routine, a battle fought quietly against an enemy called fate. Yet even as Edna labored, an undercurrent of change began to stir. Neighbors who had long since packed up and left Hawthorne started to notice small signs. A freshly painted sign on the diner's weathered facade, a stray newspaper clipping hinting at local investment, and even subtle rumors that a powerful benefactor was interested in the town's revival. In hushed conversations over rusted pickup trucks and beneath the overhanging branches of ancient trees, locals wondered what could be the source of such newfound energy. They recalled the moment when that fateful afternoon had changed everything. The moment when a man from the big city, known to many only through television, had stepped into their little diner and offered a promise. Among those intrigued was Hank, a grizzled local with a bitter edge. Hank had once been a respected farmer in Hawthorne, but economic hardships and personal misfortunes had reduced him to a shadow of his former self. His land lay fallow and his spirit had dimmed like the dying embers of a long-forgotten fire. Yet deep inside, Hank's heart still remembered better days. days when hope was abundant and community meant something. One chilly evening, as Hank trudged past the diner, he paused outside to watch a solitary light burn through the fogged windows. Inside, he could glimpse Edna as she quietly arranged the tables, a look of determined loneliness etched upon her face. In that moment, Hank felt something stir within him, a longing to be part of the revival that had been promised by a stranger's unexpected kindness. As days turned into weeks, the tide of change began to swell in Hawthorne. Trump's investigation produced a report that confirmed Edna's dire financial situation. More importantly, it revealed that Carl Jensen, the current owner, was struggling to keep the diner open and was actively seeking a way out of the mounting debts. With these details in hand, Trump made his next move. A move that would shock the town and set the stage for a dramatic turning point. On a crisp morning painted with the promise of renewal, Trump returned to the diner. With a stack of documents clutched in his hand and a confidence born of conviction, he walked through the door as if he owned the place. Edna, busy wiping down the counter, froze in mid-motion at the sight of him. Her heart pounded in her chest, torn between cautious hope and deep-seated fear of disappointment. "What are you doing back here?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of suspicion and guarded optimism. Trump placed the papers on the counter with a soft thud, his eyes never leaving hers. "I told you you wouldn't lose this place, and I meant it," he said simply. "These are the deeds. Dusty Rose is yours again, and your medical debts are gone." For a long, suspended moment, Edna stared at the papers as if they were a mirage. Her calloused fingers reached out hesitantly, brushing against the crisp documents, verifying every line and signature. Her eyes filled with disbelief and overwhelming emotion. "It can't be," she whispered, voice breaking under the weight of hope and despair intertwined. You don't get it. I let Tom die. I let my children leave this town. I let this diner slip away, and now I feel like a..." The confession, raw and honest, broke the silence that had settled over the room like a heavy fog. Trump's eyes softened as he stepped closer, gently lifting a stray lock of silver hair from her face. "Edna, listen to me," he said quietly. "You're not a failure. You've given your life to this diner. You fought every single day, even when the world told you to give up. Today, I'm giving you back what's rightfully yours, not because I'm here to change the headlines, but because someone like you deserves a chance to rebuild." At that moment, the diner's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The few patrons present, once resigned to their own desolation, watched in awe. The sound of a falling teacup, a whispered prayer, and the muted clamor of hearts beginning to beat with hope filled the space. Just then the back door burst open. Carl Jensen, the embittered owner, entered with a roar, his face flushed with anger. "Trump, who the hell do you think you are?" Carl bellowed, his fists clenched as he glared at the man who dared to reclaim what he believed was his. "You can't just waltz in here, buy out my property, and expect everyone to kiss your ring." Trump's gaze hardened, his voice cool and resolute. "Carl, I paid you double what this place is worth. You've been drowning in debt, and your losses were inevitable. Fight me if you want, but know this. The people of Hawthorne have waited too long to be forgotten. They deserve better than empty promises and broken dreams." After a tense moment that felt like an eternity, Carl's face contorted in a mixture of rage and resignation. With a final, scornful glare, he spat, "Fine, keep it, but don't expect any thanks from me," and stormed out, leaving behind a silence that spoke volumes. Trump returned his gaze to Edna, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "This isn't just about a diner," he said softly. "It's about taking back what's yours and what belongs to this town. You have a chance to revive not just Dusty Rose, but Hawthorne itself. I see strength in you, Edna, It's time to show the world that hope can rise from the ashes." Edna's eyes shimmered with tears that held both gratitude and a fierce determination. "I don't know where to begin," she admitted, voice trembling yet resolute, "but I promise I'll try." In that instant, the transformation began. Trump's words, his actions, and his unyielding belief in the power of second chances had ignited a spark that would soon engulf the town in a blaze of renewal. News of the miraculous turnaround at the Dusty Rose Diner spread like wildfire through Hawthorne. In the days that followed, the town's atmosphere shifted from one of resigned decay to a budding sense of purpose. The diner, once a symbol of neglect and sorrow, became the epicenter of a revival that extended far beyond its faded walls. Local residents, many of whom had long since abandoned hope, began to reappear. Neighbors who had left for the city started returning, drawn by whispers of a reborn community. The old farmer, whose rough hands had weathered years of drought and loss, emerged from the shadows with renewed pride. A young mother, her child's laughter echoing through the empty streets, helped set up makeshift stands in front of the diner. Even Hank, the once embittered local whose heart had grown as barren as his fields, found himself compelled to lend a hand. One early morning, as the first golden rays of sunlight illuminated the dusty streets of Hawthorne, Hank approached the diner. Clutched in his calloused hand was a small wooden box, an artifact from his past that he had carried for years without fully understanding its significance. He hesitated at the door, memories of a happier time flooding back. A long-ago corn festival, laughter shared with Edna, and a promise that had once bound the town together. Inside the diner, Edna was busy preparing for the day, her determination clear in every measured movement. When Hank entered, the murmur of conversation fell to a hush. His eyes, once hardened by despair, now shimmered with a tentative hope. "Edna," he began, his voice rough yet sincere, "I found something in my barn. Something I thought I'd lost forever." With trembling hands, he opened the wooden box to reveal a faded, sepia-toned photograph of Edna and him together at that very corn festival, decades ago. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she recognized the image. A reminder of days when Hawthorne was alive with promise and the future was bright. "Hank, I had forgotten about this," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You kept it all these years?" Hank nodded slowly, his expression softening. "I did, Edna. I held on to it because I believed in you, believed in us, and now maybe it's time to rebuild what we once had." In that moment, as the photograph glowed in the morning light, the diner's door opened again to reveal more familiar faces. Neighbors, some with tear-streaked cheeks and others with hesitant smiles, gathered outside. They came with tools, with old recipes, and with memories that had been buried beneath years of neglect. Together they formed a spontaneous assembly, a community united by the desire to reclaim their town from the grip of despair. Over the ensuing weeks, the transformation of Dusty Rose Diner was nothing short of miraculous. With funding secured by Trump's intervention and a newfound commitment from the locals, the diner underwent a thorough restoration. The faded sign was repainted in bright, welcoming hues. The cracked windows were replaced with fresh glass that caught the sunlight just so, and inside, every surface was scrubbed clean until it gleamed with the promise of a new beginning. Edna, once resigned to a life of quiet sorrow, now took on the role of both proprietor and leader. With the help of volunteers, she organized community events, inviting everyone to share their stories and dreams. Old records were dusted off and played on a vintage jukebox in the corner, filling the diner with the nostalgic strains of country tunes that evoked a bygone era. In the evenings, as families gathered over hot cornbread and steaming coffee, laughter returned to the streets of Hawthorne. One day, while the diner buzzed with the lively chatter of renewed hope, a young reporter arrived. Lisa, with her ponytail bouncing and a microphone in hand, approached Edna. "Mrs. Harper," she asked tentatively, "word is that you've saved this town. Can you share your story with us?" For a moment, Edna hesitated. The thought of speaking to cameras and reliving painful memories was daunting. But as she looked around at the smiling faces of those who had come to believe in her, she found the strength to speak. "I thought I'd lost it all. My husband, my children, this diner," she said, her voice growing firmer with each word. "But I learned that if you never give up, hope will find you. Today, I'm not just reclaiming a building. I'm reclaiming a community. Hawthorne may be small, but its heart is mighty." Her words resonated deeply. Soon, local and even national media began covering the revival of Hawthorne. Trump's earlier intervention became a symbol of second chances and the transformative power of belief. With renewed attention, investors arrived with plans to develop the town further. The once forgotten streets of Hawthorne were spruced up, old storefronts were given new life, and a promise of agritourism took shape as local farms began collaborating with community leaders to showcase the region's heritage. As autumn gave way to winter, Hawthorne embraced its transformation. The diner, now fully restored and buzzing with energy, was more than a place to grab a cup of coffee. It had become the community's living room, a beacon of revival in a landscape that had once known only desolation. Trump made another unexpected visit one crisp morning. Dressed in a simpler suit and an earnest smile, he stepped through the door of the diner, pausing to take in the sight of Edna bustling behind the counter, surrounded by familiar faces and new beginnings. The air was filled with the aroma of fresh coffee, warm bread, and the unmistakable scent of hope. "Edna," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his earlier promise, "I'm proud of you. You took back more than a diner. You revived a community." Edna's eyes welled up with tears, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and determination shining through. "I never thought I'd see this day," she replied, her voice soft but sure. "But you reminded me that even when everything seems lost, there's always a way to rise again." Before long, word spread that Hawthorne's revival was not just a local miracle, it was a story that would inspire countless others. Visitors began to trickle in from neighboring towns and even distant cities, eager to witness the rebirth of a small town and the indomitable spirit of its people. Among them were families, artists, and even business people, all drawn by the promise of transformation and the belief that hope, once kindled, could change lives. One such visitor was a young school teacher who saw the potential to build something lasting in Hawthorne. She approached Edna with a proposal to start an after-school program aimed at preserving the town's history and nurturing the next generation. "We can document your story, your struggles, and your triumph," she said passionately. "It's a story that deserves to be told, not just here, but to the world." Edna agreed, and soon a small museum was set up in one corner of the diner, displaying artifacts from the town's past. A faded photograph, an old cash register, even Tom's wedding band that had once nearly been sold away. As the years passed, the revitalized Hawthorne grew in ways that none could have foreseen. The agritourism project blossomed into a regional attraction, with local farms offering tours, fresh produce, and a glimpse into the lives of those who had once been on the brink of forgetting their heritage. The Dusty Rose Diner, with its freshly painted sign and restored charm, became the beating heart of the community. A place where every meal was a celebration, every conversation a tribute to the past, and every laugh a promise of a brighter future. In the midst of this transformation, life in Hawthorne was not without its conflicts and challenges. Hank, the once grumbling local who had slowly come around, continued to struggle with the scars of his past. One crisp winter evening, as the diner's windows glowed warmly against the cold, Hank found himself in a quiet conversation with Edna. "I used to think this town was dead," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "But now I see that it was waiting for someone to remind us all of what we once had." Edna, ever the pillar of resilience, reached out and squeezed his hand. "Hank," she said softly, "we all have lost something, but sometimes it takes losing it to find what truly matters." The diner's transformation became a metaphor for the entire community, a reminder that even when the past is marred by pain and regret, the future can be rewritten with courage and compassion. Families reunited, old grudges melted away, and the renewed spirit of Hawthorne began to ripple outward, inspiring nearby towns to seek their own paths to revival. Trump's role in this journey, though often shrouded in the mystique of his unexpected interventions, came to symbolize more than just political power. In Hawthorne, he was seen as a catalyst, a man who had stepped into a forgotten diner and, by extending a hand of unexpected kindness, had helped light a spark that would forever alter the course of a community's history. On a bright spring day, as wildflowers began to bloom along the dusty roads of Hawthorne, Edna stood outside the diner looking out over a town reborn. Children laughed as they chased each other among the fields, and the once deserted streets were now filled with neighbors greeting one another warmly. In that moment, Edna realized that her journey was far from over. The diner was hers, yes, but it had also become the home of a new generation, a living legacy that she was determined to preserve. At a community celebration held on the diner's front lawn, Edna addressed the gathered crowd. "This diner," she said, her voice clear and strong despite her years, "was once a symbol of my sorrow, a constant reminder of what I had lost. But today, it's a symbol of hope, of rebirth, and of the unbreakable bonds that tie us together. We have all lost something along the way, but we can choose to rebuild. Let our story be one of resilience and determination, a testament to the fact that, no matter how hard life hits, we can always rise again." The crowd cheered, and even Hank, who had once doubted the possibility of change, wiped a tear from his weathered cheek. Trump, standing by with his trademark steely gaze softened by genuine warmth, nodded in approval. "Hawthorne isn't just a dot on the map anymore," he declared. "It's proof that even the smallest spark can ignite a flame that lights up the darkest night." As the years turned, Hawthorne continued to thrive. The Dusty Rose Diner, forever transformed, became a landmark, a place where history and hope intertwined. Its walls, now adorned with photos of past and present, told a story of struggle, perseverance, and the power of community. Local newspapers chronicled the town's revival, and stories of Edna's unwavering determination became the subject of documentaries and heartfelt tributes. In quiet moments, Edna would often sit by the window of her diner, gazing out over the fields that had once seemed barren. She would touch Tom's old wedding band, the same ring that had nearly been sold, and whisper a silent promise to him, to herself, and to the town that had embraced her in her darkest hours. "I won't let you down," she murmured, a vow of renewal echoing in her voice. Children grew up hearing the tale of how one woman's grit and one unexpected act of kindness revived an entire community. Teachers recounted the story in classrooms, and the memory of Hawthorne's rebirth served as a reminder that even when the world seems indifferent, hope can always be kindled by those who dare to believe in a better tomorrow. Years later, on a warm summer evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and purple, a small crowd gathered outside the diner. Edna, now older yet still resilient, stood on the newly repaved front steps and addressed the assembled townsfolk. "We have come a long way," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "And our journey is proof that no matter how heavy the burdens of the past, we always have the power to shape our future. Let this diner, our home, be a testament to our strength, and let every soul that passes through here know that hope is never truly lost." The crowd erupted into applause, and as the diner's bell rang out, a sound that once signified isolation and despair, it now heralded a future filled with promise, a community reborn from the ashes of its own hardships. And so, in the small town of Hawthorne, beneath a sky that had once witnessed sorrow and neglect, a legacy of hope was written. The story of Edna Harper and the Dusty Rose Diner became a living fable, a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person's courage and one stranger's unexpected kindness to transform lives, to mend broken dreams, and to ignite a flame that burns brightly for generations to come.